What is going on, podcast people? Man, is it great to be here with all of you. My name is Tyler Bruner, and welcome to this inaugural episode of Beyond the Broadcast. I'm so excited to be starting this brand new journey with all of you. Now, I'm no stranger to being in front of a camera or to doing podcasting, but this is the very first time in a long time that I'm creating content for something that isn't related to work. And I'm so excited that you're all here for this brand new journey. I'm not going to try to keep it too long with this intro. I've already recorded it like 5 separate times, and I'm just going to stick with whatever I'm recording right now. My name's Tyler Bruner. I have been in the broadcasting sphere for what has been 7 years, 4 years of college, and now I was doing it as a professional not too long ago. 2.5 years as a sports broadcaster, and every single moment, I just loved it. You know, I was learning new things on the fly. I was working with people in the industry who have been doing it for so long, and I've been missing that part of my life. I really have. I've missed broadcasting. I've missed meeting the people, talking to the people, and now I get to do just a little bit of that with this brand new podcast, Beyond the Broadcast. So this podcast is all about going beyond in life, and who better to start this whole concept of going beyond than my very first guest here on the podcast. It is Mr. Jeff Blankman. He is a Hall of Famer in the state of Iowa, I think specifically with the Iowa High School Athletic Association. And Jeff, if I'm wrong, I know you're probably watching. Let me know if that is wrong in any means. But Hall of Fame broadcaster, big Nebraska Cornhusker guy, and we talk about everything and anything in this interview. We talk about Nebraska football and where they stand with a brand new Big Ten on the horizon. We talk about some Nebraska volleyball and the amazing moments that they shared at Memorial Stadium. Of course, if you missed that, very big moment for Nebraska volleyball, and Jeff was there in the flesh, so he talks a little bit more about that experience. And then, of course, we talk about getting into broadcasting. What is it all about? What are some things you should learn along the way? It's such a great and insightful interview, and Jeff felt bad about talking as much as he did, but honestly, he just has so many great points that he brought up throughout this entire broadcast, or this podcast, I should say, that are really, really insightful. So I'm going to stop talking, because if I do, I'm going to keep talking for a long time. So sit back, relax, and if you're in the car, probably not the best time to do that. Might want to pay attention to the road, but enjoy this interview with the one, the only, the Hall of Famer, Jeff Blankman. Jeff Blankman, Hall of Famer. What's up, man?
Not too much. How the heck are you, man?
I'm doing good. I'm doing great.
This is drawing me into doing a video with you. I mean, come on, man.
Hey,
man in the business. I have a shirt that says my face was made for radio, and now you're sticking me on video. What's up with that?
I mean, you said it yourself. You know, we got to evolve with the times, and we gotta keep changing as the landscape of radio broadcasting changes, man.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's changed so much.
It really has.
25 years that I've been in this crazy business, so still love it, but yeah, I don't know how many more years I got left.
You know, I pulled you in for this just because, you know, you've been such a great mentor to me throughout these last few years. You know, I've had the chance to, I don't want to say idolize you as a broadcaster, but, you know, whenever you came and broadcasted stuff at the high school at Arweva, you were always the guy that was there. So, you know, it's always so great to kind of pick your brain on some of this stuff, especially just talking about, I mean, your work ethic. I mean, you're one of the most insanely hardworking people in the radio broadcasting business, or any business for that matter.
I don't know if I credit my mother or blame my mother for that, but you know, either way, my mom, Pat Blankman, had a lot to do with that. So, and my 2 brothers. So they don't know anything but work. So
I mean, I got to work with 2 great Blankmans. I mean, your brother was my high school teacher, and then I got to work with your ugly butt all the time.
Yeah, you learned a heck of a lot more from my brother Jim than you ever did from me. I'll tell you that.
Well, you know, man, it's strange not being at Carroll Broadcasting anymore. And this is half the reason why I wanted to start a podcast, because this is what I've missed. I've missed the talking with people and just kind of BSing. And I don't think there's anyone better to do that than with you.
How many years were you there? I'm trying to think. It was 2 or a little over
It
2, right?
was 2.5, and it would have been 3 if I would have stayed
Right.
throughout that season. So
Yeah, I don't know if I called you Tyler more than 5 times when I walked into the studio.
you came in Dingleberry, idiot, stinky, whatever, man.
I had a different nickname for you every day, and I'm glad you took it because it was all in fun. Some people are probably going to watch this and go, "Man, I wouldn't want to work for him," but I never meant anything derogatory about it. It
No.
was all just, it was whatever came to my mind at the moment as I walked in the door.
And that's the side that I don't think a lot of athletes. I think you do show that a lot when you go and talk with your athletes, and I know we'll get into a lot of that here in this interview.
Yeah.
We go through so much. I was making my list or my bullet points, and man, there's just so much that I think I've learned being around you in that sports sphere. So
Right.
I guess I just want to start by getting your story on that. I mean, how did this journey in broadcasting start? Because I've asked you a few times, and it's so interesting to see how you've gotten into this world and how you've kind of molded this whole career into from your love of sports.
Yeah, it all starts as a young kid, I guess, in a way. I just loved sports. I don't know what it was. I think my dad had probably something to do with that. He was a diehard Nebraska fan, and I don't remember anything except for going to Nebraska spring games when I was a kid. So I think I made 30 some straight from the time I was born until finally got too busy to be able to make a few. And I still get out there when I kid. But no, my memories of a kid, besides working and mowing lawns and moving snow and baling and all the different things that we had to do, was sitting around and watching sports on TV and then watching ESPN when it come out. So I grew a love of sports. When I went to school at first, I wanted to play basketball, and then I wanted to be a teacher because I wanted to coach. Well, I wasn't a real good student, didn't enjoy being in school. And for any young kids out there, don't follow me with that. Work hard in school, get educated, because it's going to benefit you a lot. I try to tell every kid I talk to that don't follow that part of my story. I didn't care about classwork, and now I wish that I could go back and do that part of it over. But I decided that I didn't want to teach because I didn't want to be stuck in school all day. So I'm like, okay, if I can't teach back in my day, it's like it's really hard to get into the coaching world if you're not a teacher. So I'm like, how do I stay involved in the sports world? Well, it took a while. I was not a good writer, so I'm like, I can't go in a newspaper, on those type of things. And eventually I went to school, dropped out because I got a job working for the federal government. I had worked for them over summer with an internship after my freshman year, and they contacted me about halfway through that first semester of my sophomore year and said, hey, we have a full-time position available, and we'd really like to have you apply. And if you do, more than likely you're going to get the job. And I thought, well, I can work for the government, make some good bennies, all those kind of things. So dropped out of school and went to work for them and did that for, I don't know, 6-7 years, and then got bored with it and went to work for a farmer over by Ames and worked for a large farm corporation. And eventually sports radio started kind of growing, with the talk shows and ESPN and the Foxes and all those guys. And so I found that on the radio. So anytime I was in a tractor or in a vehicle or wherever I could listen to sports radio at that time of my life, I was listening, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to try and get a job doing that. I want to be a talk show host on sports and stuff. So I went back to Iowa State because that's where I was living. And I walk into my advisor's room, and he's like, what do you want to do? And I told him, and he goes, you don't need an education to do that. He goes, just go get a job in radio. I'm like, seriously? And he goes, yeah, you don't need to be here taking classes that aren't going to interest you at all and stuff. So there was 3 sports stations at that time down in Des Moines, and I got really lucky. For about 2 months, I drove down every day, or every week, I should say, not every day, but I'd stop off at those and talk to people there and kind of let them know I was interested. Didn't have a degree, but it was like, I'll do whatever you need me to do. So I'm going to give a shout out to Johnny Wright, who hired me at an ESPN affiliate, The Jock, in Des Moines, and brought me in and says, I don't have a paid position, but we can teach you radio if you want to learn it. And I'm like, great. So I learned from guys like Jerry Wright and Bob Dyer and my good friend Mark Behrens as well. Kind of took me under their wing, Danny Cron, and learned a little bit about the business. And then I give a huge shout out, Bob Dyer, one of the greatest men I've ever known. Finally came to me and says, you've been here a year and we haven't paid you yet? And I'm like, no, that's fine. I'm learning the business. I was working full time during the day, driving down to Des Moines every night after work and working, 4 or 5 hours at night and stuff, and then going to my full-time job during the day. Sometimes the jock would call me at my full-time job at lunch and go, hey, we need you early today. Is there any way? So I would burn a half a day of vacation and leave my full-time job to go work somewhere I wasn't getting paid just because I wanted to get into the business. Well, Bob got me on full-time, there and stuff, and they hired me to be the ops manager of a classic country station down in Osceola. And so, went to do that. And then eventually they were in receivership when I started working for them. Eventually, both the sports station and the classic country station got sold off. So I was kind of out of a gig. And luckily, the Carroll job had come and open. And I applied for the Carroll job. And I owe Bob Dyer a lot for helping me get hired. I'll tell the story. John Ryan, the ops manager at Carroll, told me that he goes, we interviewed you and you were okay. He goes, but we called your references and we called this guy Bob Dyer. And all Bob said to us is, and this is Bob, was, if you don't hire him, you're the dumbest MFer I've ever talked to. And so I got the job in Carroll, and the rest of the story is history. But I had mentioned Bob earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Bob wrote for Sports Illustrated and Nebraska's magazine. Husker Illustrated wrote for Sporting News and was Chicago and St. Louis, and the Des Moines Register sports editor for a long time before taking over as the GM at the sports station that I worked in Des Moines, and he was also the morning host. But man, one of the things I loved is when I was in Osceola, I'd drive up every night and I'd stop off at the Jock just to chat with him, and I'd go sit in his office, and he would just tell stories. He interviewed Muhammad Ali and Jim Brown and all the greats, back then. And so just to sit down and listen to Bob's stories was just fascinating for me. And almost every night at some point, his wife, Pat, would call the radio station and say, Bob, tell Blankman to go home so you can come home. Supper's getting cold. So that's how I got my start. Long story, but that's how I got my start in the business. I was willing to sacrifice whatever I had to just get my foot in the door.
And I think that leads into a question I was going to ask, because, we've talked at a couple of high schools when I was over at Carroll Broadcasting. We talked with kids in the business and stuff like that. Radio broadcasting is, I don't think it's dying, because it's a necessity, in my honest opinion. You can't get rid of that live form factor. So, I'm loving the transformation the business is taking. But talking about kids that want to get into broadcasting, specifically sports broadcasting, what does it kind of take? I mean, because you and I know it's long hours, and there's a lot of things that are unsaid that go into being someone like that. So what do you suggest young people kind of do if they want to get their foot in the door?
Be willing to go talk to somebody. I have no problem having kids come and sit in on a broadcast. If you're a school, like Tiger Vision, if they would want me to come and talk and teach their kids how to do the play-by-play and the color commentary, I would have no problems with that. But I think it's getting involved. Watch the game. And as I think I told you, don't just watch the game for the highlights and the cool things, the dunks and the big 3-pointers or the great catches in football, or the home runs in baseball or whatever, but watch and listen to the announcers. There's a difference between TV and radio. TV people are going to be able to see it for the most part and stuff. And so you don't have to be so descriptive, but I always say that if you're a radio guy, your job is for that person that's driving down the road. You've got to paint a picture in their brain as you're talking. So as they're driving down the road, they can see the game because of your description. So work on those things, work on your English skills, work on your speaking skills, be able to be a great communicator. And I think being a great communicator, I've said this at several of the schools I've talked to over the years, being a great communicator isn't just going to help you in what I do, but it's going to help you in every job that you do in your life. I don't care if you're running a garage or you're a mechanic or whatever. You've got to be able to order parts. You've got to be able to talk to customers. All of those things are going to make your business more successful. So being able to communicate in a clear and nice way is certainly going to benefit you in anything you do.
And I think it also ties into kind of what I've now branched off and done with all the video stuff. It's not being afraid to mess up. I know I know there's extra added pressure, especially if you're on air, because you're live and you can't mess up. Right. But I think it's number one, just starting, and number two, just not being afraid to fail.
Right. And mistakes happen. I was talking with somebody the other day. I think Cole Strider, a young kid from Creston, that's interested in getting into radio, and he's at Iowa State now, and he's doing some different records and different things for them. And him and I were chatting, and he said a great thing, and it's 100% the truth. Some people edit everything they do that they put out on the air because they want it to sound so perfect, and that almost sounds robotic. Sometimes having those little mess ups that you have, those little mistakes, humanizes you a little bit because you're not perfect. There's nobody that sits down and does a radio show perfect every day without having a little bit of a flub now and then. I'm not saying it happens all the times, but you misspeak, you say a word wrong, not that you want to get names wrong. Those are probably things to correct. But sometimes, if you have a little hiccup in a broadcast, it's not going to hurt anything. It lets everybody know that, there's a human sitting on the other side of that thing, and humans do make mistakes.
Yeah. And the one question I was thinking about, of the times, I've messed up plenty of times, and I'll tell this story because it's a perfect example of, you talked about getting out, talking to people. The story that I think I love telling people is this is how ingrained in my brain. This is
it the Glenwood game?
It is the Glenwood game. So I love telling this story because it's just the fact, you get into the business and you're so nervous and there's all these emotions that go into it, but it was Glenwood. There we go. I was thinking Woodbine for some reason, but it's Glenwood and it's Kemper, and Kemper's at home. So, it's you and me. I think it was the first broadcast we had done together because it was just that first year that we did.
One, because you went up to Newell Fonda Girls with me with Kemper to start that year.
That's right.
But you were listening that time doing color commentating. So this was your first actual play-by-play that you were going to do, and I was going to let you do the play-by-play, and I was going to do color commentating.
Right. And so the biggest thing that happened, of course, any good broadcaster, you need to get the names right. That, I think, is the most important thing. That's a big lesson I've learned. Even nowadays when I'm talking with people, that's so important. And so I remember pre-game, we're getting ready, we're getting our sheets put together, and you tell me, hey, we need to know the opposing team's names. Can you go down and get the names? And
wanted to get you used to always going down and talking to the coaches.
Yeah, exactly. And so this was the first time I ever did it, and I was so nervous and so scared, and guess what? Nothing happened after that. I got the names, and then after that fact, I did not get a name correctly, and I learned from that moment because we got blasted on social media for not doing our research. And
we were doing video of that game, and somebody from Glenwood was watching the video, and being we were getting a name wrong, they blasted us on the social media and stuff. Yeah.
But that's a learning lesson. I mean, it's Absolutely. Like you got to make those mistakes, whether they're big, whether they're small. It's moments like that where you're going to remember it the next time you're in a situation like that, and then it's just going to keep sticking and sticking. It's the same thing with broadcast. I mean, you gotta be willing to make some of those mistakes.
I'll tell you a funny story. When I was at college up at Iowa Central eons ago, when I was in high school, you weren't forced to take speech or any of those kind of things. But when I got to college with my major, I had to take a speech class. And for as easy as I can stand in front of a group of people today, and this is a message to all the people that are kind of quiet and shy and bashful or nervous like you were, it happened. I remember writing my first speech, and I walked up in front of the class, and I sat my speech down on the podium and looked up at the class and went, oh, God. Then I looked back down at the speech and went, I'm not going to be able to do this. I looked back up at the class and went, oh, God. And then I looked back down at the speech. And the third time I looked up, I just grabbed my speech off of the podium, walked to the back of the class. I handed it to my professor, and I literally walked out of the class and dropped the class that moment. I walked right into my advisors, and I'm like, I'm out. I'm done. I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to speak in front of a group of people. And all it takes is going and doing it a few times to get comfortable. You start to realize it's not that bad. It's manageable. And now I don't think it would. Now, I'm not saying I could stand in front of 26,000 people in a big arena. I probably would get it done, but there'd be some nerves. But anymore, I can go stand in front of a class or a gym full of people, and I'm good. So you can go ahead.
Sorry, hold up. I'm gonna grab something real quick.
Yep.
So, what? Okay, I got it. So apparently this is something that Hannah was out today looking for stuff, and I'm like, hey, I need some stuff for the podcast, and she found this really cool.
Nice.
It's got like little figures. It's golf.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty cool.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
That's
You're
so
lucky
cool. I love that.
You're lucky to have a great
Where did you
fiance.
find it? At Goodwill. That's
Nice.
so cool. I'm also like taking people through the process of making a podcast, and obviously my wall is about as bare as my booty. So
That's not a picture anybody needed. Bye, Hannah.
Oh, I just had to share that. That's so cool.
Yeah, that was great to share that. The only part we didn't need was the booty part, man.
That's true. That's fair. That's fair.
You're so lucky to have an amazing fiance.
I don't know if lucky is the answer when, I fart all the time and then she's got to be the one to complain about it,
Well, what I miss the most is you telling me that, God, you call me so often that Hannah thinks that, that you and I are boyfriend and boyfriend because I talk to you more than what you talked to her when she was living in Kansas City and you were working up here, because I forget time of the day. I will admit I'm horrible at that, but there'd be times I'd be sitting here at the house at 1:30 in the morning and I'm like, I know he's still up. I'm just going to call him, and I call you. And it's like, I grew up in a house where it's like, you never call anybody after 10 o'clock at night. 10 o'clock at night is bedtime for everybody. That's against the rules. And now it's like, I'm texting coaches at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm calling you at 1:30 in the morning. But yeah, I leaned on you so hard to learn as much as I could about technology while you were here, and you did such a great job of teaching me. I'm still not real smart, but I'm better at it than what I once was. That's for sure.
Hey, what's going on, podcast peeps? It is Tyler Brunner, the host and creator of Beyond the Broadcast, and I am beyond happy that you are enjoying today's episode. And if you are, and if you want to see more of Beyond the Broadcast, of course, the easiest way to support us is by following us on your preferred podcast platform and following us on all of our social channels. You can find those in the description of today's episode. All right, we got some more lo-fi hip-hop and plenty of more Beyond the Broadcast coming up next. But, that's the one thing that I think is so exciting about radio broadcasting nowadays, especially a lot of places in the Iowa area. I mean, so many stations nowadays are really accepting of this new wave that we're getting into where, if you're not doing video, if you're not doing podcasts, if you're not doing all these things, you're really falling behind. So that's really exciting for people who are young, who want to get into this business, whether it's marketing, whether it is broadcasting or podcasting. All of these things have now really been integrated really well into a lot of stations. And of course, we did a lot of that when I was down there, of just developing this new technology and really embracing it.
Yeah, I said probably 10 years ago that if radio doesn't become a multimedia organization rather than just being radio, you mentioned earlier, radio's not dying. Radio would have died if radio wouldn't have branched out and got involved in doing all of these things. I don't think Carroll Broadcasting Sports Department would be where it's at today if we hadn't started doing video 10 years ago. And then when we brought you in, improved that by creating the video commercials and getting better equipment. And luckily for, we had you there after you had went to BV and learned all of those things, that you improved the product that we were trying to do. Then we developed the sports only website and got on Instagram. And the only thing you didn't do was get me on TikTok, and that's still not gonna But, I look at a lot of radio stations. I think we were the first in the state not to do video, but the first in the state to go live on the website with audio on the video. And now a ton of people are doing it, and several had passed us for a long time. And I think we're back into that category of doing a really good job now with what we do. But, you implement in what we've done with the website and everything else. And I'm really happy with the direction that, our bosses and stuff at Carroll Broadcasting allowed us to be able to go with everything we do. Rini, Rini, one of our my coworkers and your former coworker said something to me the other day about, well, it's your fault you have to work all these hours. You're the one that created ESPN here at, at Carroll Broadcasting and stuff. And I'm like, that's what I always wanted. I wanted to have a really good product. And I think with your help, we were able to do that. And now I've got, Casey Miners helping out. And it's nice to have young brains to be able to figure out some of the things that we need to do. That I might, as I told you, I have the mind of what I want it to look like. I'm just not always for sure how to go about getting it done with some of the newer technology. So it's nice to have some young people to help out with those things. So thank you very much for everything you did.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's something I really wanted to do, was get back into the video sphere. I've missed it since college, and I'm glad that we were able to really make something cool and continue to make something cool for the community members, because I tell you what, those highlight videos, people love those things.
They do. And you did a tremendous job. We're still doing some of those, nowhere near your level. And I'm still trying to sweet talk him. I think it's working, to bring him back for state track this coming spring to do that. And for all of our listeners that might pop on his thing here, I think we're going to get him back there to put a video highlight package together. If not, just blast him with messages about how important he is. No, but it's great. Like, the ICAM Man and Girls 2009 state championship team got honored here earlier this season, and that was a lot of fun. I did the broadcast that night, but Casey came down and put together. It was a very quick ceremony at the beginning, so it wasn't going to be a very long video. But he took some of the pictures from Jeff Storyhan that he had taken that night and incorporated those in there. And man, that thing just absolutely blew up when we threw it out on Instagram and stuff like that. And it's great to be able to share those type of things with the people that maybe can't make it to those events, and to highlight the area kids. Because you had asked about radio earlier. I still think the biggest thing is don't get in this business to promote yourself. That if you're going to be at the big networks, those guys promote themselves all the time, and that's what it's all about. But be humble, and make it about the schools that you cover, the kids that you cover, the coaches that you cover, because that's what you do this for. And they're the ones that if you become somebody that has a name, or you become popular in the business, it's because of what they're doing, not really what you're doing. So remember that, be humble, and do it for the right reasons.
And that is really a good segue into the way in which you develop relationships with not only athletes, but coaches, almost anyone that you go around. I mean, I know you say you don't know a lot of people, but I'm always blown away by just the amount of people that you know, but also the quality of which those relationships are. And I want you to get into just how and why you decided to do that, because I think it's a very humble and a real approach to these kids. Because I mean, we've talked about it. There's some of these kids that are so nervous because you're this personality that you kind of put on the radio, but you come across as such a humble and nice guy that, you're developing authentic relationships with people.
Yeah. It all goes back for me, to a situation back in Manning. This was I'm trying to remember. I think they were ICAM Manning at that time. No, maybe it was still just Manning. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to call her by her first name. I don't want to, throw her name into it fully if she wouldn't want it. But there was a young lady that was an outstanding volleyball player down there named Trista, was her first name. And I had interviewed her after some volleyball matches. I had interviewed her after a state match, so I thought she knew who I was, and stuff, and how dumb I was. So I went down after a basketball game. She was a cheerleader. I went down and I watched Coon Rapids Bayard against ICAM Manning in a basketball doubleheader. And it was right after the first of the year. And she was sitting in the bleachers all by herself in the front row after the games were over. I had stayed around and talked to some of the coaches, and I was like, I'm going to go see if she's going to play college volleyball somewhere. So I walk up to her and I'm like, hey, Trista, you decided where you're going to college yet? You going to play volleyball? And she kind of looks at me and starts getting a little bit white, and stuff. And I can't remember what I asked her after that or whatever. I think I said something like, well, if you figure it out, let me know or whatever. And she's getting kind of that scared, like, look on her face and stuff. And I said to her, I says, do you know who I am? And she's like, no, who are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm Jeff Blankman from the radio station up in Carroll. Oh, okay. And then she was comfortable to talk to me. But I realized at that point, even if you interview some of these kids, if you don't kind of interact, I guess, with them a little bit beyond when you're just on the headset, that they may not be comfortable, to talk to you and stuff. So, I'm not saying that you call them and text them and Snapchat them and all those kind of things, because there's a line that you don't want to cross. But at the same time, when we go to track meets, we go down on the field, we go down on the football field, we're down there, you were down there, you go down there to be able to get interviews, but you also go down there to be able to kind of chit chat with them a little bit. They get to know you, and it humanizes you a little bit and allows them to be more comfortable, which makes our job easier, because then when you go to do an interview with them, you're not this is the radio guy. It's like, it's Blankman, you know, he's nobody, and that's exactly the way it should be. And then they're comfortable to be able to do really good interviews with you.
Yeah, and I know the one moment that you've talked about, especially with just again relationship building with these athletes. There's one in particular I think that stands out to you. It's Blaze Gunderson over at Nebraska.
Yes.
Such a big
Yeah.
fan. I think he's a big Jeff Blankman fan, because every time you
He's
go
a really
there,
cool dude.
he's really cool. And the fact of the matter is, I mean, you're this guy from, a small town in Carroll, Iowa, doing sports, and he's, an up and coming figure within the Nebraska program. And, the fact that he did what he did, and I'll let you tell the story. It just, again, it goes back to how you built relationships all these years. And that whole interaction you had with him was so cool.
Yeah, it kind of the gist of it was I had went out there for one of their spring games and got it set up where I could interview Blaze after the game. Well, he had, gotten pulled into the big media room to be able to do, the interview with everybody and stuff. And I just remember I'm standing there amongst, the big time media people and stuff in our business. And he sees me and he comes over and just gives me this big bear hug, kind of in front of everybody as he's getting ready to go into the locker room before they came into the media area. And it was just one of those that it was kind of like, he was excited to see me there for one, which was cool. And stuff. Always enjoyed covering Blaze, but I think that one it might have been freshman or sophomore year. He is still fairly new down there, but it was just one of those things that some of the national media people that were there were like, "Who's this idiot standing over here?" And stuff. But yeah, that was pretty cool. But that all goes back to developing those relationships and trying to get it where the kids are comfortable. And one of my favorite things to do is to be able to try to get to the college games when kids make it to college. I feel bad that I can't get to everybody, but trying to get to as many kids every season as you can on your nights where you're not broadcasting the game. And part of that for me is that I do care about what happens to them later in life, not just that 4 year, or if they're playing as an eighth grader, that 5 year span of them in high school. I want all of these kids to go on and have a great life and enjoy things and be very successful in everything they do. And then for me to be able to kind of sit back and watch it, I can sit here and go, man, I knew them guys when they were kids, and now look at what they've went off to do. That's cool, and you're happy for all of them that go on and truly become very successful.
Right. Do got one very specific question talking about on-air stuff,
Yeah.
always interesting to see how, different broadcasters react in different moments. And I think the one moment that some people don't know how you prepare for is those moments you can't prepare for. So you talk about an injury, you talk about something dramatic that did happen on the field. How are some ways that you prepare, maybe mentally or just ahead of time? How do you prepare for those moments you really can't prepare for?
I don't think I do. To be honest with you, I think it's just a reaction thing. You hate to bring up these type of moments, but I've had it before where an official has had a heart attack in the middle of a basketball game and collapsed out on the floor, and the human part of you has to come out immediately there. You want to as I said earlier, you want to paint the picture, you want to let your listeners know, but at the same time, you don't have any details. I just knew the official had collapsed. I assumed heart attack, but didn't know until they brought out the machines and started to revive him on the edge of the court and stuff. But you pretty much, what I did was like, an official has went down, folks, we're going to step away and take a break and you go into a commercial break, and then you try to gather yourself a little bit and see what's happening. And then when you come back, you kind of describe what you're seeing. At the same time, you don't want to act like you know exactly what the situation is or what happened, because you don't have all the facts, because you're up in the broadcast booth, and stuff, and so you try to get through it the best you can, and you really pray that nothing like that happens. And then the other concern is that when things like that happen, we had a young gentleman, certainly not going to use the name, but the situation I'm talking about, that got seriously injured during a basketball game here a few years ago. And you've known the person for a couple of years because you've covered them, and God, you're scared to death for their health and their future and everything else. So your job is to keep the listeners informed. At the same time, you certainly don't want to speculate or any of those kind of things. And it's hard. It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody has to handle those situations differently and kind of how they're comfortable. I mean, for you, how did you handle any of those kind of situations that came up in games that you were at?
I think it's a lot of what you kind of said, because in moments like that, you really don't want to seem like you're cold, you're heartless. I mean, we all got a job to do in broadcasting to an extent. And, it's the fact that you don't have all the facts, but you're trying to give people that visual. Again, since you're on radio, you're trying to give the visual, what's going on, the court, what's all going on. Is the person okay? Are they getting up?
Right.
But it's also explaining it in a very, like a way you're like not trying to suggest something. So
Right.
a lot of the ways it's on radio, you have to be delicate with that, of just how you're saying something, because you don't want it to come across like this is exactly what's happening, or or you don't want to put speculation into people's minds. So it's just being careful of how you present that knowledge. And again, it's being in the moment. It's taking yourself away from what could be happening here soon. It's getting yourself in that moment and thinking, just how do I present this information I'm seeing in front of me to the best of my ability.
Well, one thing you always try to remember too is there might be a family member that's listening. So the last thing you want to do is put any thoughts or anything into that person's head that may make the situation worse for them. So you just got to be very, very careful. So, yeah, those are the situations. I'm hoping I got 16, 17 more years left in this business. We're hoping, but I'm hoping I can get through those years without having any more of those type of incidents happen. Yeah.
I do want to get on a positive side, because I think it's a sad one. It's a sad, but it's always good information to give out. But
yeah, absolutely.
You've been in the Carroll broadcasting area 20 years now, which in of itself is an incredible feat. What are some of the best moments, best athletes that you've had the pleasure of being able to call? I know it's a big list, and it's hard to condense that down, but who are some names that come to mind?
Names. I'll kind of start when I first started. I'd have to say, Shelley, at that time, Shelley Mossman, now Shelley Haluska, and then Sean Haluska. They were both Carroll grads, and Matt Dentlinger up at Kemper, and oh boy, you threw me on the spot on this. I didn't go through my brain, before. Oh God, Tommy, he was a great pitcher at Kemper. When I first came, it was like my very first year. I can't think of what his last name is right now off the top of my head, but Casey Kaspabauer and Taylor Ostrich up at Carroll, and Bryce Berg at Kemper, and Brian Fogelman down at IKM Manning, and Reed Tellinghusen and Justin Kraft at East Sac County, and oh boy, just we've been so lucky. Amy Dentlinger at Kemper went and played volleyball, and Lexi Albrecht, from Kemper, that went and played basketball in Iowa State. Just been so lucky, so lucky to have covered so many great kids and great athletes that have come through this area. I should have thought, and I should have known you'd probably ask me something like this, and I'd have sat down and started to go through. But yeah. And then you ask great moments. You got to think of the back-to-back Southern Cal football championships where they go for two and win both games. and stuff with Greg Olson as their quarterback, or Greg Meyer, excuse me, as their quarterback. Had a flash to the NFL announcer there for a second, but Greg Meyer as their quarterback, and winning them back-to-back state championships before they combined to make South Central Calhoun. You look at the Kemper kick from Adam Schleichman that won them the state football championship. I look back at the game over in Denison, probably Manning girls, Kemper girls to go to state. They were by far the two best teams in state that year in girls basketball in Class 2A, and it was so bad that they had to meet in the regional final to go to state. And just what a tremendous game. Still one of my favorite games to ever broadcast. And one of the cool things for me, my brother Jim was teaching you guys over at Arweva at that time, and had some Arweva people reach out to me, within the days after that game. And they're like, we were listening, and who were you pulling for? Because we couldn't tell. You'd get excited when Kemper scores. You'd get excited when Manning did something good. It's like, who are you pulling for? And I'm like, I wasn't pulling for either one of them. I cover both schools. I just, I didn't have a preference on who won. I wanted a great game. I felt so bad for whoever was going to lose, because they should have been down at the state tournament. That should have been a state championship game. And I felt so elated for, who won. And it was just a great game to call. But that's the way it should be. People should be able to listen to you and not know who you're rooting for, because you're not rooting. You're just, you're there to describe the action, unless you're specifically only there for one team.
Yeah.
But that brings up another name. Tammy Drees was just a tremendous player, and stuff with Kemper. That was her freshman year, and I think she had 18 that night, and stuff. But what a Kelsey A. Scheid was another great one from up at Kemper. And I can just, the names will just keep coming back to me.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Sam Brinksy played over it for your Hawkeyes from Kemper, and
let's go. Hey, what's going on, podcast peeps? It is Tyler Bruner back hanging out with you once again. We've got another break here on the podcast, so make sure you get on up, you stretch your legs, get some of your favorite drinks, your favorite snacks, because we got plenty more beyond the broadcast coming up next. If you are enjoying this show, just make sure you follow us on your preferred podcast platform, because that's how we're going to grow the show. That's how we're going to get more guests, and it's just going to be a lot more awesome for many more episodes to come. Also, make sure you follow us, subscribe to our social channels. You can find those in the description of this episode. All right, we got some more lo-fi hip-hop and plenty more beyond the broadcast coming up next. We've got, mismatching shirts on right now.
Yes, go Big Red.
Oh man, I knew you were gonna say that. That makes me sick.
I try. And you're black and gold.
I am all the way,
you're
baby.
Black and gold. Absolutely.
All the way. I know when I switched to my cam, it's got Morningside here in the background.
Okay.
My fiance went to Morningside, of course, one of the best NAIA programs.
Yes,
currently. They are just monsters in that league.
We've had so many kids that have come through up there. Addison Ross was one of those. Just more names keep filing back, so I'm going to keep throwing them out. But Julia Fleece was just a great player. Her and Holly Hanlos over at Glidden Ralston. So as I'm sitting here, more and more names. Lacey Vogt from Audubon. It's amazing how some of the names are trickling back into my brain a little bit. So
yeah. Well, let's talk a little Big Ten then. I mean, we're both Big Ten guys, and we love it. We're of course on the cusp of what is going to be probably one of the biggest shakeups in college football ever. I mean, Super Conference is on the rise. The Big Ten's now no longer a Big Ten, but is inching towards a Big 20.
Hasn't been a Big Ten for a long time.
That's very true. It hasn't.
When they added Penn State, they called themselves the Big Ten, but they actually had 11. And stuff. And then they added, Nebraska and added Rutgers and Maryland a few years later to have 14. And now they're going to be up around 18. So.
Yeah. So what's your thought on that horizon? I mean, there's so many elite teams that are now going to be in the Big Ten. How does Nebraska stack up against a brand new revitalized Big Ten?
Going to have to get an awful lot better than what we've been the last 10 years or so. And I really love what Matt Rule's doing there. I think the direction of the program is headed in the right way. Same with a lot of our other programs. Of course, John Cook is an amazing and elite coach with the volleyball program, and they're so fun to watch. And I've been lucky enough the last few years to be able to go out to some of those, including the volleyball game, the volleyball day at the stadium this last fall. Went out with two good friends of mine, Jeff and Sherry Storyhan, and I joked there was 92,003, and I said the reason why they got the three was because the three of us. but you know, I still think Nebraska can compete, and I know a lot of fans are going to give me a hard time from the other schools and say our day are done. I'm not talking the 90s, and that's what everybody always kids Nebraska fans about. You got to get out of the 90s. I'm not living in the 90s, but Nebraska was really good in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and also the 90s. And I think there's a day that I'm not saying that we're going to win national championships or dominate college football, but I do believe there's a day where Nebraska can get back and be relevant, can be a top 15 program, can contend for Big Ten championships, but we're nowhere near that right now and have got a long way to go. And I would say that with the addition of the new four teams coming in the Pac-12, the chance to get there has gotten tougher because all four of those programs probably at this moment are better programs than what Nebraska is. So now to climb just to become relevant again in the Big Ten, we've got four more schools to crawl over the top of. For you as a Hawk fan, you finally hire a new offensive coordinator. Your head coach seems to be frustrated still, and the interim AD that fired Brian got the full-time job. So if there's going to be, what are you thinking for the Hawkeyes in the Big Ten with all of the changes that are coming?
It's going to be, I think, a lot of the ways. I know that as a Hawk fan, we've been in a lot of ways spoiled because our offenses have been horrible, but our defenses and special teams have really kept us afloat in what is a completely awful part of the Big Ten that we're in. There's no competition. It wasn't good this year. No. And adding teams to it, you never know how good it's even going to be. But, I think it's going to be a lot of the same in some ways of, it's going to be a lot of fighting to be on the top. And I mean, even though there is a 12-team playoff now, especially with the lack of, the Pac-12, it's going to be interesting to see what teams from Power 5 programs or Power 4 programs, I guess you can call it now, how they're going to get into the playoffs. But I think the Hawkeyes, especially with our new offensive coordinator, it's going to be interesting to say the least, but there needs to be, I think, a lot more stability on the offensive side for Hawk fans to really be comfortable. Because, I mean, we were absolutely embarrassed in our last two games. Didn't score a touchdown against Michigan or against Tennessee in that bowl game. There needs to be change, and it needs to happen, and it needs to happen quick.
Your thoughts on Tim Lester as the new OC?
I haven't had time to look to see where he's been. Where was he right before this?
Western Michigan.
That's right.
But he was then after that, if I remember correctly, he was an analyst with the Packers. I think this past season, if I remember correctly. I got to admit, folks, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to what's going on over in Iowa City. I live in the state, but I could care less what's happening in Iowa City.
I think he comes from a pretty decent program. Western Michigan has been a very tough non-Power 5 school for a little bit. I think after Frost left, or no, Frost wasn't from there. Never mind. Or was he from there?
No, he was Central Florida.
Central Florida, there we go. He was UCF. But, Western Michigan has been up and down throughout the last few years. But I still think it's a very good program to see what we can do. And I think so many people this past season put so much pressure on Brian Ferentz, which come to expect it. But, there needs to be some changes in order, I think, for us to feel, I guess, comfortable. But I don't know how much more comfortable you can get with a Big Ten championship appearance. Like, come on.
Yeah. I mean, you win 10 games this year. Your offense is awful. But and thank you guys for that, because Nebraska's offense only ranked a couple of spots ahead of you guys and nobody seemed to
Woo-hoo!
talk about how bad Nebraska's offense was this year,
Right.
because the whole national talk was how bad and anemic the Iowa offense was. But you're getting Caden Proctor back.
Right. Yep. That's huge.
And that's going to be huge as an offensive lineman. He'll come in having started as a freshman, a true freshman down in Alabama, and now he's coming back to his home state. So I think that's going to help. But yeah, I think the Big Ten. I really think the Big Ten will get 3 or 4 into the playoffs probably every year, maybe 5. The SEC is going to be the same way. I think the Pac-12 will be lucky to get maybe 2 most years. ACC depends on how long Florida State's there and how long Clemson's going to be there.
Yeah.
Because I honestly think that the divorce will happen at some point or another with Florida State and the ACC. It's done. There's no way to rebuild that relationship. So it's just going to depend on how much it's going to end up costing Florida State, and the networks, because ESPN and Fox really run college football now. They're the ones that have the money, that are throwing the money at both of those conferences and making all of the decisions. So when Florida State gets out, it'll be interesting to see where North Carolina, where Virginia, where North Carolina State, where Clemson, where some of those other schools, end up, where Miami of Florida ends up. So, I think that 4 or 5 of those will probably end up in either the SEC or the Big Ten, because they're going to be good enough football wise.
Mm-hmm.
And then when does it happen that the Power 50 schools or Power 45 schools or whatever that number is going to be breaks completely away, forms their own league, and then splits into divisions and has kind of almost an NFL look, where you have one division against another division, and the division winners end up meeting each other for the national championship.
Well, and that was going to be my next question to you, because, this whole change in college sports, just in general, it's not just football that it's being affected. It's all these other sports now. How long do you think it is until we see a new conference, or a new quote unquote super conference, made out of the chaos that's already ensued?
I think I think within the next 5 years, and I think it might be less than that, that you'll see the SEC and the ACC break away. The Big 12 might survive because they've continued to fight, so they might be able to survive. They might be able to pull some of those ACC teams that are going to get left in the dust into them. And I think, I've told some of my Big 12 friends, that are frustrated about things, and I completely understand. But what I've told them is that you guys don't need to pitch yourself as a football conference. Don't try to compete with the ACC or the SEC and the Big Ten in football anymore. You're the best basketball conference in the country, and that's what you need to sell yourself at, is that we're going to dominate everybody in basketball and be the best basketball conference in the country, and then do what you can to compete in football. But I don't know. You bring up the other sports. I feel for the basketball world and softball world and volleyball and baseball and wrestling, lacrosse and all those other sports. I can't imagine the travel that they're going to have to do. The rumors I keep hearing, and I hope that it's true, is eventually someday what is going to happen is when the football schools pull away, that you'll get back to, it may not be the old Pac-12, but all of the other sports will go back to more regionalized conferences. Either that, or, what you'll have is like the Big Ten and SEC will split all of those sports into more of a regional. So it won't be the same maybe as the divisions that football will be, but teams on the West Coast will be back into playing more of the teams on the West Coast in more of a conference type of a look for all of the other sports. And I think that would be good. All of these moves made 2 reasons: 1, money, and 2, football. And those are the only 2 things that matter. And I don't think a lot of the coaches and athletes and a lot of the other sports are probably overly excited. And I'm an old guy. I'm one that I'm not afraid to adapt to the future. As you've heard me say, I hate it when people my age go, it's not the way it was in the 80s. Well, in the 80s, it wasn't the way it was in the 60s. So get over it and move on. But I don't know if I'm a big fan of, 20 teams in a conference. And I miss the regional stuff. I do miss the regionalization of what made college football what it was when I grew up as a kid. But, I'm still going to sit down and watch. I'm not going to not watch a Nebraska game because we're playing Rutgers, or because we're playing UCLA and they're not, a regional school and they're in our conference now.
Well, and you also talk about the fact that recruiting now has become a lot more expansive. I mean, Iowa's now going to have to compete with Washington, Oregon for kids in that region, where so much of those kids are going to be used to getting recruit from those colleges. So you're almost going to get some of those talents that are from those power states to stay home, and you might see a boom in UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington as the years go by, because kids from Washington don't want to play in Minnesota or Iowa or Ohio.
Well, and some of it's going to be who's offering the most money in today's world with the NIL. I know the Swarm's done a really good job over in Iowa City and stuff, but it's coming down, and not all kids are going based off of money. Some of it still feel. I think more of the high school kids probably look at the NIL packages and go. I think once you've been in college 3 or 4 years, it's more about fit and playing time probably that you're going to make those decisions. So if you're in the transfer portal, not that the money's not important, but I think a lot of it, for if you're going into your junior year, you want to be developed right, you want playing time, you want to be in a system that's going to highlight you. And I think that's going to be more of a factor, where for the kids coming out of school, it's like if you're 18 years old and somebody's offering you 1.5 million, to come play for them, it's going to be hard to turn that down, whether or not that's going to fit, that system's going to fit you, or it's going to be the right place. And when you're 18, none of us made great decisions when we were 18 years old. So I certainly don't blame the kids. I did say something to some friends of mine here recently that were complaining about the NIL and the transfer portal. And it's not that I love those things, but I'm like, when we were 19 years old, if somebody would have came to us and said, I want you to transfer from this school to this school, and I'm going to pay you $1.75 million or $750,000, whatever the number is, there ain't a one of us that wouldn't have jumped on that. I mean, that's just human nature and it's life. So for all of us adults that are screaming and pounding our fist and yelling, just remember what it was like to be 18 to 22 years old.
Hey, what's going on, podcast peeps? It is Tyler Brunner, the host and creator of Beyond the Broadcast, and I am beyond happy that you are enjoying today's episode. And if you are, and if you want to see more of Beyond the Broadcast, of course, the easiest way to support us is by following us on your preferred podcast platform and following us on all of our social channels. You can find those in the description of today's episode. All right, we got some more lo-fi hip-hop and plenty of more Beyond the Broadcast coming up next. I do want to get back to you going to that big volleyball game at Memorial Stadium. I got to see it from one perspective, but you got to see the grandeur of everything. So what was it like to be there in that moment?
Probably one of the best things I've ever attended in my life. I had a blast. We stayed for a little bit of the concert afterwards, but it was a unique atmosphere. I mean, I've been to some huge Nebraska games for football at that stadium over the years. Nebraska, Oklahoma, when we're ranked number 1, number 2, and Nebraska when we hosted Miami of Florida here a few years ago and had that rivalry from the 90s kind of renewed and stuff, and the atmosphere was different. It was really, really loud for those events because there was so much emotion put into it, but it was a different emotion. It was almost like a love emotion kind of coming out, and you were a part of something that's probably never going to be ever duplicated or matched ever again. So it was a different emotion, but it was just, you walk into that place, and for me, the back of the hair on the back of my neck stands up every time I walk into the stadium down there in Lincoln. So but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Loved the seats, could see well enough, and a great experience. Just one of those things that I'm glad I got the opportunity to do that, and I'm glad that I took the 8-10 hours, whatever it was. Now I can't remember back that far to be able to get tickets. That was a long day of getting kicked off the computer, trying to log in, getting kicked off of phone calls, trying to phone call, and but glad was able to do it. I wish, the only thing I wish, I wanted 5 tickets because I wanted to be able to take other people in case they wanted to go, but there was no place left in the stadium where you could get 5 tickets anywhere close. The most I could get was 3. So it would have been nice to be able to get maybe 2 other tickets so 2 other people could have experienced it with us.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it just shows the amount of support that Nebraska fans really put into it. I know you guys get so much hate, and as an Iowa fan, I think it's just we have to do it. But I'm one of those fans where I'm a Hawkeye fan, but I'm not going to sit here on a pedestal and say we're the cream of the crop in the Big Ten, because in a lot of ways we're not. I mean, for wrestling, women's basketball, for sure.
Right.
But I think that there's some ways Nebraska fans get this really negative outlook on them. They're kind of some people say the doormat of the Big Ten, but my God, you can't even imagine how many people would fill a football stadium for a volleyball game and how successful that would be at other places.
I don't think any other fan base would have been able to do it besides Nebraska. And that's not me trying to be arrogant and not picking on the Hawkeyes, because, Caitlin Clark is just a whole different level of a story. But, they held the basketball game at the football stadium there in Iowa City this year and wasn't able to sell it out. And it's a smaller stadium, so it just goes to it. And, Nebraska fans get picked on it, and rightfully so. We were arrogant for a long time, as, for 50 years, that football program was, kind of the cream of the crop, won 5 national championships, played for about 8 more than that, never had less than a 9-win season. And I'm not living in the past. What I'm saying is I grew up with a lot of that. You get used to that. And I think Nebraska fans got a little arrogant and just anticipated that was never going to end. And when it ended, we probably didn't handle it real well and stuff. And we looked down on programs like Iowa that we used to thump, on a regular basis and stuff. And we've been humbled a little bit, but the one thing that they've never quit doing out at Lincoln is we don't quit going to games. You look at, programs that are really good. I mean, just a few years ago, Iowa still wasn't selling out their football games, and you guys were good. And Nebraska's not been good, and we're still finding a way. Doesn't mean everybody goes, and the sell-out streak probably should have snapped a few years ago. But Nebraska fans still buy tickets. Nebraska fans still go, and they support athletics. Part of that is we don't have a college. We don't have another college. We don't have an NFL or a pro franchise out there or anything. But, it's a different love. People don't understand when we lose a football game. I'm miserable for all day on Sunday. I mean, I'm just absolutely – if I didn't have to talk to anybody, if I didn't have to hang out with anybody, I'm 53, almost 53 years old, and I'm like a little kid, man. I sulk, and I'm bummed, and I'm brokenhearted, and I never thought that at 53 years of age that sports would still have this impact on me. But God, I hate losing. I hate losing so bad. But I hate losing more than I like winning.
Right. Well, and I really think, it's really nice to see Nebraska fans rally around a team that deserves that. I mean, Nebraska volleyball has been so dominant for so long. Yes. And I think all these other programs at Nebraska, they're getting their football. We've talked about it so many times, how many 1 point, 1 field goal, 1 touchdown games they've lost. Football's going to get there. Volleyball's already there. Men's basketball, that's one that's on the rise. I mean, there's so many of these programs that I think Nebraska fans stick with and really are just so loyal for.
Oh yeah, baseball team won the conference a couple of years ago and made the regionals and need to get back. Softball team was in the College World Series here just a few years ago. Now you bring Jordy Ball in, is probably the best pitcher in all of softball, and hopefully she'll be able to get us back maybe into the College World Series or something. Don't want to put too much pressure on her. I want her to come in and enjoy being able to play in her home state for her last couple of years. But, Amy Williams has done a nice job with our women's basketball program. They were upset yesterday by Rutgers, but, team that good enough to get into the NCAA tournament this year if they can squeeze in. And then, of course, you guys always give me a hard time, but women's bowling, we're ranked number 4 in the nation, man. Can't forget about the women's bowling program. They've more national championships, I think, in women's bowling than any other program in the country. So,
and you guys at least get that,
and Mark Manning's doing a terrific job with the wrestling program. So the Huskers were alive and we're doing well.
Absolutely right. I got 2 more questions because you've already given me so much of your time, man, and I appreciate it so much.
You're good. I feel bad because I told you when you were, here a minute ago, I'm like, God, I feel like I've gotten on all these preachy, serious subjects, and haven't been able to call you Dingleberry yet today.
There you go. Now you got it in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an inside joke, folks.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll tell you what. If anyone sees you out in the wild, you're so kind and nice and generous, and you give out so many of your secrets and stuff like that. I know I'm buttering you up, man. I shouldn't be doing this really.
You're going to throw me under the big old truck here in a moment.
No, the only two questions I got one that you might have to spill some secrets about.
Okay.
But the last one's kind of an awesome one. But this one we were kind of talking about broadcast stuff when we got off the tangent with Nebraska and the Big Ten, and of course we're gonna do that.
Oh,
but I want to talk about your most embarrassing your most embarrassing moment broadcasting, and the one that came to mind for me was you getting sick on air and having to puke into the jacket.
I had forgotten that when you were starting to say that. I'm like, which direction is it going? What's he going to call me out for?
Is that the big one, or is there another one you kind of point to?
I would say, that's probably the one. I was calling a Carroll Kemper basketball game one night, and I had eaten something. I didn't realize it until later that night that I got food poisoning, and it was the roughest couple of hours. There was nobody available to come take over for me. It was Carroll Kemper, so it's not like I could just end the broadcast and tell everybody I could go home. But yeah, I got sick and had to have a trash can set next to me and have to take the headphones off and do what you do, and stuff. And it was really, really rough to be able to get through. I texted the coaches during the game and said, please don't come up for post-game interviews, because I didn't want them to have to deal with what was going on in the broadcast area. But yeah, I don't want to relive that one ever.
Did
I don't
anyone
go through that ever again?
Did anyone know that you were sick, like who are listening to the broadcast?
I'm sure they could hear it, because even though I was trying to cover up, even though I was trying to cover up the mic the best I could, and then I felt sorry because where we broadcast at Carroll High, there's people that sit around. I had a little kid that was running by me. I'm like, "Can you grab that trash can?" And they brought the trash can over, and I literally sat in the front row of the bleachers there up in the mezzanine and put the trash can next to me. So everybody that was sitting around the area knew exactly what was going on. But it was about every 45 seconds to every couple of minutes, my head was in the trash can with the headset holding up above me with my hand over the microphone, trying to keep it as quiet as it. And it started in the girls' game, so I got through the rest of the girls' game in the second half of the girls' game, and then I broadcasted the entire boys' game that way too. And I didn't go into work the next day. I was so physically, I was dead. Yeah, I was as gone as you could be. But yeah, that one was embarrassing. So you're going to throw me under the bus with
God.
an embarrassing one. What's the most embarrassing one for you?
I had to really think about this. I'm trying to think back to like any moments that I've had that was embarrassing. I know that I'm probably missing one.
Nothing like that, right?
Nothing like that. I've never gotten sick on air. Never
Anything
did
down
any
the
of that.
state track? Did you like get in the wrong area, or
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
I know when we got down to state track, you guys did a very nice job of like preparing me for those moments of like, don't sit here, don't be there, and stuff like that.
Yeah. The biggest thing I told you was kind of watch Story Hunt, because he knows everywhere to go and everywhere not to go, with the type of photographer he is. So
I think the only embarrassing moments I can really think of are more so just moments where you have to take a leak and you just know you have to go. And it's like you're holding it in and you know you need a broadcast, but you're so focused on having to go to the bathroom. And then you get done and you're racing. I mean, you are full sprinting, and no one wants to see all this moving. I tell you what.
And the best part of those games are always the one that you got to go in like the first quarter, and then it ends up going into like triple or quadruple overtime. Those are always the best, right?
Yeah, exactly. I can't think of anything specifically at the top of my head, but there are probably ones that I will remember after this fact.
Yeah. We'll get you back on again someday, and we'll just make sure to embarrass you.
Oh, great. I do think the moment with Glenwood and getting the names wrong is the most embarrassing.
Okay.
Personally, you just feel bad for that stuff. You're trying to get into the business and you're trying to legitimize yourself, but you have this moment that's just broadcast to everybody. Right. And it's hard to get yourself back in the moment after that fact, and you're getting someone's name wrong, and you don't know how to say it right, so you're just kind of sitting there in your feelings in the moment trying to do your job.
Yes, absolutely. And I've had moments like that too, where you go down, you talk to coach, and you write out the pronunciation the best you can, and then you get up there and it just completely leaves you, and you're looking at what you wrote down and you're like, okay, now how was I supposed to say that? So everybody goes through some of those, right? Maybe not everybody, but most of us probably go through those. But I want to give you a shout out. We've talked, a lot about me, but you started as an intern for the merchants, when you first came, and then, you went back to school, and then we hired you on, if I remember right, after you graduated, and,
Yep.
or actually you had went somewhere else. Where were you? Down in where were
I
you?
was over in Washington.
In Washington, Iowa. Yeah. And then we hired you away from down there, and kind of brought you back home. But, from where you were at interning with the merchants to where you were at when you left us, 3.5 years later or whatever that was, the growth you had was fun, and to see what you're doing. And I still pull up some of the things you're doing down there at school, and kind of follow, the video things that you're doing and the things that you're doing. And, love all your comments on Twitter about all, the WWE and, and all the wrestling that you follow. And, but it's fun. You've grown so much, and it's fun to be able to watch. And we talked earlier about kids getting into the business. That's one of the things that's fun for me, is watching the young people come in and then watch them grow. Don't want to get off onto another thing here, because I know you got another question, but I remember when I came here, I wasn't young. I was in my 30s, because I, with all the story earlier, I didn't get started in radio right out of school and stuff. But, I was the young guy in the area when I first came. And now it's like, I'm second oldest guy in the area, in this area for radio, and to see all the young people coming in, and doing what they're doing, and then watching and listening, and how they grow as radio people is going to be a lot of fun for me. And I'll admit, I'm a little competitive. You heard me say earlier, I hate to lose more than I like to win. When I see and hear other people out there, it pushes me to continue to try and get better at what I'm doing, and continue to try and get better at what we're doing as a radio station, because, it's a business where you want to be able to compete. You want to be able to put a product out there that people want to be able to listen to, or watch, or pay attention to, and read. And so, always trying to stay a half a step ahead, the best that we can, and don't always do that. But, it's fun to be able to watch the young people grow, and then see what they're kind of bringing into the business.
Yeah, and I think another kid that I know I'm obviously going to talk with here soon, Caden Nissen's one of those guys too that came out of the area. Such a talented guy.
Fantastic.
I mean, just kicking butt. I mean, and that's again the thing that I love too, is just watching people be able to grow and change, and make those changes, and really continue to grow. I mean, this is why I'm doing this, because I want to continue to develop my broadcasting skills, develop my skills within social media editing, and and it comes full circle to what we've been talking about this entire time. It's just taking the time to put in the work, to keep doing the things, because obviously you're not going to be good at something right off the bat unless you're some talent, kid prodigy. But even those people put in a lot of work. I mean, you talk about the thing called overnight success. I mean, it doesn't exist, because people are going to see you at the moment and think that it happened overnight. But honestly, it's all this work you've put in behind the scenes that really makes a difference. And that's the thing with broadcasting too. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort, but day by day you get better. And the thing I love to say is that you get 1% better each time. You find something that you can do better the next time.
Absolutely. And you've put the work in, man. Respect a lot for what you were able to do. And like I said, I remember kind of talking to you about some of your broadcasts when you first started, and then you would go back and listen to them and figure out where to get better, and you wanted to get better, and that's why you're going to have the success, and you're going to find so much better guests for your podcast than who you started
come
with.
on. I don't know if I can get any better than a Hall of Famer, man. I can't say I know too many other Hall of Famers, man.
You'll meet a whole lot more of them someday, I'm sure. But yeah,
I hope so.
I'm like you. I'm glad you got me on this podcast, because, as you know, I've been wanting to start one now for a few years, and I keep saying that I don't have time. The hours are too crazy and stuff. And I have so many good ideas of what I want to do, and not trying to promote what I'm going to want to do someday, but hopefully one of these days, now that you've kind of got me on yours, that'll spark me to actually sit down and start mine. And stuff like that. But I want to branch out and and do all of the things too, because this kind of stuff is fun. It's been fun catching up with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I only got one more question for you, and this is one I'm going to start asking all my guests, because this whole podcast is about going beyond in life, going beyond sports, beyond the broadcast. I'm really kind of leaning into that concept of going beyond. Yeah. So talk to me just about some ways. It could be 3 things, I think, at max. What are some ways that you're going beyond in life, at work, anything? How are you just going beyond in your life?
I don't know. You know me. I don't have much of a life. Most of it probably work related. I think what we've done at the office with the website, with the video, and stuff like that. And then, I guess one thing that I could say that I'm proud of that for maybe above and beyond what you brought up, got invited to 13 weddings this last summer, and only one of those was a family wedding. So being able to develop those relationships, like we talked earlier with the kids, or, I'm getting invited to over 100 graduations a year, and now starting to get invited to a lot of weddings. And I feel bad that I don't get a chance to always get to all of them, but I try to send a card at least to everybody. But, maybe that's going above and beyond, where you develop those kind of relationships, or even, 8-10 years after a kid's out of school, that they still think to invite you to their weddings. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a cool thing to hear. I mean, obviously you don't have, I think people who invite you to weddings know you can't make it to all of them, but the fact that you take the effort to send them those cards and to, let them know that you're thinking about them is always something that I've admired in your interactions with people, and that's rubbed off on me in more ways than you can expect. And it's really helped me develop a sort of confidence, because again, the more you do it, the more it just gets used to doing that stuff.
Absolutely. And then, continuing to improve our state track coverage and what we did with state wrestling here these last couple of years, I guess are, all work related things for me. If anybody that doesn't know me, they're going to learn there's not many things in my life beyond my job. Wish I had more time for my family and did more things. And that's probably the one thing that you helped me be able to do with your help. And now with KC being around here, I've been able to make some family things that, couldn't make in the past. And now I'm trying to carve out more time. So anybody getting into this business, that's probably another key thing to do, is make sure you don't throw away the family time and give up too much. I'm not the only one that does it. You look at the guys that have to broadcast games on Christmas and New Year's Day and, all those things, they're away from family. And it's not just the guys that are broadcasting, it's everybody that's working in the truck and on the cameras and everything else. People forget, that we love to sit down on a New Year's Day and watch football games, or on a Thanksgiving and watch football games, or, on Christmas Day and watch all those NBA games, and stuff. Everybody forgets that those people that are bringing you all of that are missing their family time to be able to bring you those broadcasts. So, if you're wanting to get into this business, you're going to have to do some of that. You're going to have to probably live with doing some of that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, man, it's been great.
It has.
Man, I've loved the conversation. Yeah, right. Man, it's been great catching up with you. I know this won't be the last time we have you on the show, because you're just you're so knowledgeable in all this stuff with sports that, we'll talk. When Nebraska wins that bowl game, I know we'll talk next time.
Oh God, I might have a gray beard by then.
I tell you what, when Thanksgiving Day game happened between the Hawks and the Cornhuskers, I'm like, you know what? We've already clinched a spot in the Big Ten championship game. Let's throw the Cornhuskers one, and we couldn't do that for you.
Yeah, no, and I don't ever want handed one.
That's true.
I want to earn it. I do want to earn it. But hey, thanks for having me on, man. Hopefully next time we'll have to have a little more fun, and I won't get off on so many serious topics, because the one thing I always want for people in radio, it's what I told you. It's the same thing I tell the guys that help me in everything. It's like, we're going to work really hard, but let's go have fun doing it. And we joke around a lot and stuff and have a blast. And I thank you for being a part of that and some of the craziness that we had for that time you were here. So.
Yeah, I don't think people want to really know what we do behind the scenes, man. It's not good.
You get 6 guys crammed in a hotel room, and stuff on those state track ones,
I tell you what, that's the side of we'll go beyond the broadcast, but we're not going to go to that point.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Just say it gets a little bit crazy. But you know what? Those are the moments that you cherish. You get around a group of people that are so much fun to be around. You make the work fun, and that's in turn what makes things so great.
Yeah, I say even though we're putting in 19-hour days at state track, it's like a vacation for me because I'm hanging out with people I enjoy or working hard, but we have a lot of fun in doing it.
And before we go, I should say the one thing, I guess an embarrassing moment that's outside of broadcasting is this past state track that I had purchased my car at. And of course, I'm texting back, yep, I'll be there. And I was in the process of buying a car. I thought the process would have been done, and it got done pretty close to the time we were leaving for Des Moines. But that's probably the most embarrassing thing is not rescheduling that for afterwards.
Hey, it all worked out. We made it.
Yeah,
that's why we go. That's why we go down the night before, so that we can be there 2 hours before the event starts the next morning.
And here I am making one of the biggest financial purchases of my entire life.
Absolutely.
Oh, so, Mr. Blankman, it's been great.
Runs. Can't forget the Snookies runs.
Oh God. Oh, if you are ever in the Des Moines area, I don't care what you're doing there. Wow. Even if you're just there for no reason at all, go to Snookies. Yeah. Please. This isn't even a sponsorship. They should sponsor this podcast, by the way. But hands down, one of the best ice cream places. And it's not really like in the middle of anything in Des Moines. It's next. Right. It's near-ish to Drake Stadium, but trust me, folks.
Half walk, yes.
Yeah, we walk there all the time after whatever events. If there's a big break in state track, we go and get Snookies. I mean, one of the best places in Des Moines.
Absolutely. So,
oh, yeah, man.
We'll quit trying to get you sponsors.
No, I would. Oh God, I would hate that.
Oh, I know. Yes.
Well, I tell you what, this isn't the last time we'll have you on, but I appreciate you sharing some wisdom and just being so cool.
Yeah, you as well. I appreciate you bringing me on, letting me hide my face behind my microphone as best as
We'll get you accustomed.
Yeah. No, we're good. I appreciate it, man, and thanks again for everything you did for us while you were here.
Well, thank you for everything you've given me in my life, man. I appreciate it.
You bet. Absolutely.
Man, what an amazing interview with the one, the only, the Hall of Famer, Jeff Blankman. Man, I always love talking to that guy. So down to earth, so willing to share his knowledge. And those are the type of people that you can come to expect here on Beyond the Broadcast. We're going to talk to people who are doing it, who are succeeding in the world of media, social media, and sports, and beyond that, and really kind of talk about how they got to their points in their lives and what they're doing every single day to go beyond, because I think that's what we all strive to do, is to go beyond in life. So I hope that you get something out of some of these conversations, and a lot of this is just talking to people that have cool stories to tell. I mean, Jeff Blankman has been through it all, 20 plus years in broadcasting. He is doing everything in his job so well. And, people around him really do see that. And that's what I'm hoping that you can get out of this is, what can you do in your daily life to just live more, to go beyond, and it's not all work, but, it's just fun. It's just going to be a really great time. So if you do want to support the podcast, number one, it's subscribing on whatever you're listening to this on right now, whether it's social media or your favorite podcasting app that you use. That's the number one way to support me. It's just to follow me. Get the word out about what I'm doing here, because I know I can't do it alone, and I'm so excited that you're all here to support it. Again, Beyond the Broadcast is what this podcast is called, or the Beyond the Broadcast podcast, which is always fun to say. I did just get done setting up all the social media, so I'm going to tell you where you can follow us. It'll be a combination of a few things. Of course, some places have the usernames I want, other places don't. So on Instagram, you can follow us at Beyond the Broadcast Podcast. That's the whole name of the username. On Twitter, it was a little bit more difficult, a little bit more limiting, but that's okay. We are Going Beyond Pod. That is our username on Twitter. So sorry if that's just a tiny bit confusing. And also on YouTube, we are at Beyond the Broadcast. Also, we're going to be creating a Beyond the Broadcast clips channel, because that's just something that you can get your daily dose of Beyond the Broadcast, but also just check out more succinct parts of the episode. So excited that you're all here for the journey. We are going to have a TikTok page as well. I almost didn't talk about that. We are setting up a TikTok page as we speak. Of course, Beyond the Broadcast is how you can find us on there as well. Man, I feel like there's a lot more to talk about too, but that's it for episode 1. Come back in episode 2. I've got another one of my very close media friends I cannot wait to talk with. I've been meaning to pick his brain about so many things. He's a guy who inspired me to do what I'm doing now with video. I'm just excited. I'm so excited, and I'm glad that you are all here for this journey. Again, support me any way you can. It's just following. It's free, it's simple, it's easy. Engage with the content and just follow us wherever you can find us. That's how we're going to get the word out, and that's how we're going to get bigger guests. In all reality, we get the word out about this, and we're going to interview some awesome people in the future. So stay tuned. We got a lot more awesomeness coming your way. Again, my name is Tyler Bruner. Make sure you follow us everywhere you can on your favorite podcasting platform and on social media. This is Beyond the Broadcast, and we cannot wait to see you on episode 2. Have a great day. Do great things, and we'll see you next time.